Well, once again, we're in Jupiter, Florida, at our favorite antique shop, Maurice's Antique Pine. And check out this cart. A very unusual piece. I'm sure he's got an interesting story about this one. They make it a point to come here about once a month and see what's new. And I come in here looking for one thing, and I usually end up walking out with three. Like, do I really need this? I don't know. I'll think about it. Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Looking for Maurice.
Maurice Jr. or Senior?
Senior.
Oh, he's on a buying trip in Europe. I'm Maurice Jr. Hey, aren't you Norm Abram?
That's right.
Hey, nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you. I've come to check out your latest deliveries.
Oh, okay.
Tell me about this piece.
This is an old ice box. Originally, it came from Poland, and they obviously put the ice inside and kept the food cold.
It's all lined with zinc.
Lined with zinc, and of course, they put the ice in this area right here.
Are you going to sell it like this? Kind of dirty, a lot of cobwebs.
Oh, no. We'll clean it all up, make it look nice. Again, of course, people today use it for maybe a wine rack to put bottles in there or for display. Very similar to a piece, like this authentic baker's table here.
Oh, and where did this come from?
From Austria. It's an original baker's table, and the baker used to keep its flour below.
So they could load the dry goods up onto the table.
Exactly, and knead the dough, and you can see that the tabletop has been worn quite a bit.
Wow.
Lots of age, and the knots are raised a little bit from the areas where the hardwood stuck.
I think a lot of loaves of bread came off of that table.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Oh, and check this out. I love this.
This is one of my dad's personal pieces that he collects. It's a Flying Dutchman. It's a children's toy. You see the wheel turning when you move the handle forward?
Wow.
He collects a lot of neat things, very similar to these little miniatures here.
Oh, yeah, I know a little bit about these.
These are the cabinet maker's miniatures that he carried around from job to job to make furniture out of.
Show the customer a replica rather than trying to carry the whole thing.
Exactly. It'd be too heavy to carry around a big one.
You have another one over there.
Yeah, this one used to have a top on it, which is now missing. Probably had little glass doors, and people today can use it as a jewelry chest, too.
Yeah, that's neat. I certainly recognize this, a good old woodworking bench.
Nice workbench. Of course, in retail, we sell these as display pieces, sideboard tables, pots on top or some wine bottles on it. Yeah.
Oh, come on. This belongs in a woodworking shop.
Oh, yes, I'm sure it does. The real thing. Beautiful bench.
Oh, and look at this. This is a very unusual chair. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this.
This is a teak chair from Indonesia, and it was owned by the plantation owner.
All carved. Is it comfortable?
Believe it or not, it is quite comfortable. Because of the slope, it kind of looks funny, but when you sit in it, you could probably fall asleep in it. See that?
I can see that.
Quite comfortable.
A neat piece.
All teak, all teak.
Now here's something I've been on the lookout for. A small table that would be low enough to put next to a couch or just use as an occasional table.
What size could you use?
Well, I don't know. I'm looking for, under 27 inches or so.
It's around that. It's about 27 and a half by 25.
That's good.
Now look at the top. That's actually one solid piece of teak.
Teak. Wow.
It's a beautiful piece of teak there. And they actually, you know what? They carved this thing out of one chunk of wood. It looks like it was this thick, and they all carved this out.
Wow. A nice turning that was probably done on a primitive lathe and with a little hand carving work on it. And 3 legs that are let into it with tenons, I guess.
Yeah, they have mortise and tenon construction, and then they have the little dowel soldered in place.
This is just what I've been looking for. Well, it's always fun dealing with the Dutchman, and that's such a great place to find antiques. Here's our version of the pedestal table. It's just the right size to put next to a couch or in your living room to display art or flowers, and because it's made out of teak, you can even put it out on the patio. If you'd like to build your own version of the pedestal table, a measured drawing is available with a materials list, and you'll hear more about that before the program ends. Now let's talk about the stock. It's teak. It's plantation-grown teak, which means that it comes from a certified managed forest. The trees are grown to be turned into lumber. We're not taking them from an endangered rainforest. There's not a lot of stock in this piece. I have 3 pieces here that are about 1 inch thick, which will make up the top. On the antique original, the top and this little beveled piece were all carved out of one thick chunk of wood. That would be a waste. So I'm making this piece out of a separate piece of stock. I have 3 pieces to make the legs, and I still need to find some stock for this center post. So let's go out to the wood storage shed. A few years ago, we added this structure to the north side of the workshop. It's just a shed roof. It's on the north side because we don't want the wood to cook. In the shop, it was too dry and it was cooking the wood all the time. Out here, it'll be nice and cool. It's uninsulated and well vented because we don't want moisture to build up in there. It's about 20 feet long and about 5 feet deep. It sits on concrete piers. It's sided with the same material that we used inside the shop, shiplap pine siding. On this side, we have a sliding door to access the wood, and it runs on the same kind of hardware as our main door, just sliding barn door hardware. The support system for our lumber is made up of salvaged iron pipe that's let into these 4x4s. There's access on each end that's identical. I'll show you this end down here. It's really nice because we can organize our wood, and when we find a good deal on some stock, we have a place to put it. So we have all kinds of things in here. We have quarter sawn white oak. We've got a bunch of cherry, some old salvaged pine boards, and over here is some of our teak supply. Now you'll note that some of the numbers that are on the end of this will indicate the length, but also thickness. Here's a 5/4 by 6. Let me explain what this 5/4 by 6 means. When I buy stock that's rough, which means it's rough sawn on both sides and on the edges, they designate the size, 6 inches being the actual width when it was cut at the mill, and the thickness as 5/4 of an inch. When this is machined into a nominal dimension or a usable lumber, it'll be about 1 inch to 1 1/8 inches. That's standard lumber terminology. 4/4 ends up being a 3/4 inch thick board. Now for that turning at the center of our table, we need some stock, and I'm going to laminate it because that'll make it more stable. It's going to be long enough for one side. There's another piece. Now I need a 4.5 inch square blank, and that's exactly 4.5, but I haven't machined it so I can glue it up. So I think I need one more piece to build it up. Now I can't take these boards and simply spread a bunch of glue on it and clamp them up. It's just not going to work. They're not flat, the seam is going to show, and I'm actually going to waste a lot of material. The blank for the turning only needs to be a little bit larger than the biggest diameter. So I can rip and trim these pieces down. Also, the piece that goes in the center, I want it to be fairly substantial. I don't want a 1/4 inch strip there. So I'm going to take some time to rip these pieces down and resaw them. But before we use any power tools, let's talk about shop safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the safety rules that come with your power tools. Knowing how to use your power tools properly will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And remember this, there is no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses. Okay, with the 3 pieces for the lamination cut to size, I want to treat these surfaces to get a good glue joint and bond. The traditional way to do this would be to take these pieces over to my joiner and run them through. But teak is tough on knives. It has silica in it. It's like running sandpaper through your tools. Just running these pieces through will ruin about 4 inches or 5 inches of my joiner knives. Fortunately, I have a wide belt sander, so I'll use that to smooth them up. With the surfaces nice and smooth, I'm ready to glue up the blank. Now I'm wearing gloves because the urethane glue that I'm going to be using, if it gets on your hands, the only way you get it off is to wear it off. The preliminary step here is to clean this teak. Teak is a naturally oily wood, so by using either lacquer thinner or acetone, I can remove some of that oil to get a good bond. I'll clean all the mating surfaces. Now with urethane glue, the manufacturer recommends dampening one surface and putting glue on the other surface, particularly if the woods happen to be dense like this teak. So I'll just take a sponge, dampen this side of the centerpiece, actually both sides of the centerpiece. Do a quick dampening of the thicker pieces, and we'll actually squeeze the glue on the thick piece and spread it out. Okay. Now the open time for this glue is about 20 minutes, and you have to keep it clamped for 4 hours. Now I don't want to clamp it so much that I squeeze all the glue out of the joint, just enough to bring it together. And then we'll set it aside to dry. Well, while I'm gluing things up, I'll glue up the blank for the top. And as you can see, when I put these pieces together, the joints are not anywhere near close. So I will have to turn to the joiner to straighten out these edges. I've pushed the fence on the joiner all the way out to the edge of the knives. I am willing to sacrifice an inch, but not 4 inches. All right, we'll set this aside to dry, and it will be ready to work on again in about 4 hours. Well, here's what happens after the glue is cured. You get this foaming during the curing process, and now I'm just using a scraper to remove the excess. The next thing I want to do is true up this blank so that it's about 4.5 inches square. Now I'll square up one end and cut it to exact length. Before I can bring this piece to the lathe, I have to find the center on each end. So I'm using this plastic centering tool, and I like to go around to all 4 edges and put a mark. That gives me the absolute center. Now I'm going to take this compass and just trace out a rough line of the radius, and that'll give me a guide so that I can trim off these corners. That'll save me time at the lathe. Now I've moved my fence to the left side of the blade, tipped it to 45 degrees, and adjusted it so I stay just outside that line. With the drive center driven into the blank, I can slide it into the lathe and then bring the cup center over, tighten it down, and set it in. And then we'll give it a real low-speed trial to make sure it's balanced. That's good. The first step is to use a gouge to make the blank round. Okay, with the piece round, we're ready to start doing some layout. And here I have a piece of 1/4-inch plywood with a full-size layout of the turning, with all the transition points and diameters. First, I take this template and mark the transition points and transfer a line all the way around the piece. With all the events marked out on the blank, I can start to work on individual areas. On my guide, I have the diameter. So I'll take my calipers, set a diameter. In this case, I'm going to start at 3 5/8. Then I'll take a parting tool and make a cut until I get to the exact diameter. Yeah, that's pretty good right there. The next one is going to be right here, which corresponds to these 2 marks, and that's 4 inches in diameter. Now there's some shallow V grooves that go in these locations, and to make those I'm using a skew chisel. For the last few minutes, I've been very carefully refining this section of the post. It's very critical that that be flat because that's where the legs have to fit into the mortises. Using my calipers and my various turning tools, I'll slowly complete all the details in this turning. It's going to take a while, but tomorrow we'll easily be able to finish this project. Well, good morning. Last night I did finish the turning of the post and sanded it smooth. It's a pretty accurate reproduction of the original. The pedestal table has 3 legs, which means they sit at 120 degrees to each other. So using an adjustable protractor, I've laid out the center line of each leg, and I'll be ready to make the mortises. To make the mortises, I built this jig made out of plywood. It's basically a box with a couple braces to hold it square and a top piece with this window cut in it. I'm going to set the jig on the lathe and remount the turning in the lathe. Now I have a window that I can put a router through with a collar, and the first thing I want to do is make a flat spot about 1.5 inches wide. I've set up my router with a 5/8 inch collar and a 1/2 inch bit. Okay, that's good. Now I'm going to install a template with a smaller window and cut out the mortise. That's one. Now, while the post is still secure in the lathe, I'm using this corner chisel to square up the mortise. Now for the legs. Here's a blank and here's a template of the shape. I'm in no hurry to cut the shape. Beyond this edge there's a tenon. I want to form that first, so I'm going to clip these corners at 40 degrees. There's the first shoulder cut. Now I swing the miter gauge to 40 degrees on the other side of 0 and make the corresponding shoulder cut. Here I've set up my tenoning jig, which makes cutting the cheeks of the tenon a snap. Now I can trace the pattern and lay out the top and bottom of the tenon. Then it's over to the bandsaw. Let's take another look at the prototype. The leg tapers from the column down to the tip, and I think that's an important detail. I'll make that taper using the belt on my sanding center. Before I can apply any glue to the joint, once again I want to clean it with some acetone to remove any oil. I'm applying a little bit of my yellow carpenter's glue, not the urethane glue this time. I don't want the foam to come out around the joint. It would be very difficult to clean it up. It's just a snug fit. Here I've threaded a band clamp around some bar clamps, and that's so that I can put a little bit of pressure to pull the joint tight. I'd say that that does it. Let's start working on the top. The first piece I want to work on is this tapered piece, or hub. I've got a blank here with the diameter laid out. I've tipped my bandsaw to 45 degrees, and I'll make the rough cut. That 2-inch hole in the hub fits on the tenon of the post. Now here's the blank for the top. I'm going to scrape off the excess glue and sand it smooth. Here I've just drilled a 1/4-inch hole, which is the pivot point. I've installed my circle cutting jig on the bandsaw, We'll drop that hole over the bolt, and we'll cut a circle in no time. Now to take the sharp edge off the corners of the top, a slight chamfer with my chamfering bit. Once again, with the mating surfaces cleaned with some acetone, I'm now ready to mount the hub to the underside of the top. Just center it, and I'll install 4 screws. Okay, a little glue on the tenon and in the hole, and we'll drop this on. Get down nice and tight, and gravity should hold that in place. Now once the glue is dry, we'll do a little sanding and take it into the finishing room. Now if I were planning to use this piece outside, I might do nothing, just let it weather to a nice silvery gray. But since I'm planning on using it inside, I'm applying a Danish oil. I apply a nice heavy coat, let it sit on there for about 30 minutes, apply another coat, let that sit for about 20 minutes, and then wipe off any excess. Of course, the more coats I put on, the better it's going to look. Well, there it is with a couple coats of oil. And boy, this teak looks great. Now next time, we're going to build this 4-drawer chest. We've been looking for a small Chippendale chest like this for quite some time. We found this antique at a store in southeastern Massachusetts. And I'll build a reproduction of it next time right here in the new Yankee workshop.